But I see messages.
Hello and welcome, welcome, welcome. Um, Congratulations and thank you to the late night people on Friday night who are tuning in to this session today. If you are at the fireside chat for new information and advice, this is an Ask Me Anything session from people who hire people to job seekers. My name is Holly Holliday. I am the president. I hold two hats. I'm the president of Sisters Lead, Sisters Vote. So I run an advocacy organization that empowers Black women leaders. Feel free to check out our booth tomorrow as well as our session that's happening tomorrow afternoon. But also, I am also the CEO and chief strategist for Holiday Advisors, where we really focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion for progressive organizations. And so earlier, I had the privilege of hosting a session for consultants and vendors and how to create space for vendors of color to be a part of our progressive sphere. And this evening, we're focusing on job seekers and how you can manifest career opportunities with progressive organizations. I have two fantastic ladies here with me today. You're going to hear a lot from them. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. But trust and believe this is a session you want to let folks know about. Before I let them introduce themselves, let me let you know this is an Ask Me Anything session. We want to hear from you. We want to make sure that we're adding value to your job search, your career ambitions. So, any questions you have, please drop them in the chat. We can see the chat and we'll respond to them verbally. Um, Ariel, start with you. Tell us, please introduce yourself to our audience. And hi, William, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Holly. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Ariel Goodwin, and I'm the Deputy Director of Employee Engagement at J Street. J Street is a pro-peace, pro-Israel organization that works to build towards a two-state solution, working with our local government here in the U.S.
Awesome. Thank you, Ariel, for being here. And next we have another stalwart, and this coming from a different angle where Ariel's here representing progressive organizations. Patience is here representing progressive foundations, a very important partnership in the progressive movement. Patience, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. So good to be with you tonight. I am Patience Peabody. I'm the executive director of the Flamboyant Foundation. We are headquartered in Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. We're an organization that funds education work and arts and culture work in Puerto Rico. It's been around for about 13 years, and very excited to be here. Know that in this Ask Me Anything, anything is on the table. So ask away. Let's go.
Let's go. Let's do it. Well, listen, one thing that I find exciting about being in this space is that working in the kinds of work that we do, it really is not just about the skills that we bring to the table, but it's an opportunity for us to live our values through our work. Talk about and share with me sort of why you do the work that you do and how it aligns with your values. Patience, will start with you.
Yeah, that thank you for asking that question. It's so important and it's something I've carried with me very early on. A mentor told me that my life is my legacy and every choice I make is a part of that, and look at my career as an extension of the legacy I want to leave behind. So, you know, I think it's extremely important to know who you are and understand what legacy you want to leave on this earth when you depart. I think it's important to think about that from the beginning. And you want to make choices that align with that. We are, our to be our whole best selves. We want that sort of alignment. We spend a lot of time at work. We spend a lot of time giving. to our career, and that sort of whole life outlook feels important. So, when I decided to come to Flamboyant Foundation, one of the things that was very true for me as a person who I'm a native Washingtonian, grew up in a very sort of poor family economic situation, experienced a lot of homelessness growing up. And so when I made my career choices, when I went to college, it was all about take over corporate America. And just by happenstance, I ended up taking a fellowship program that was called the Congressional Hunger Center, Bill Emerson National Hunger Fellows, that totally had me rethink the nonprofit sector. I never
Yeah.
really was taught that you can, make a good living and, in alignment with your values in the nonprofit sector. And the thread that sort of runs through the choices that I've made in my career is about, my legacy that I want to leave is around disrupting the intergenerational cycle of poverty. And so I'm really thinking about, it's really important to me with every choice that I make that there has to be some alignment to poverty disruption, social justice, and some sort of education youth development work. And I've been able to carve that out for myself in creative ways.
Awesome. What about you, Ariel?
Well, I don't think I could say it better than Patience just did. That was just amazing. But I think, working in this sector is something that I think most people, they come to it with different paths, but they know that it's right for them. They know that they want to be working with people who are passionate, who care about the communities that they're working in. And that's where I found my home. I worked in the government sector, I worked in education, and I keep going back to nonprofits. And I think that it's the spirit of giving back and being part of a community and really understanding, the communities that you're there to work with.
Yeah.
And so I think
Yeah.
people who you just know that this is the work you want to do.
Absolutely. And let me tell you, I think you have inspired someone. We have our first question. And I think you kind of hit upon this, sharing the different kinds of experiences you've had. And William asked, how does a person with multiple skill set convince an organization that they are committed to a career change? And I think many of us over the years, you start out in one direction, and both of you indicated this, and then you end up in another. What are some things and some advice that you can give to people who are looking to enter the progressive space?
All right, you want to take this one out, piggyback?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. So I think it comes down to that values, and so you may not have the exact experience that the organization is looking for, but you have a shared sense of values. Those are aligned. So you just want to think about how you demonstrate, whether it's in when you're applying in your resume, your cover letter, how you're demonstrating that alignment through all of the different experiences that led you to where you are, and that passion will come through.
100%. Patience.
Yeah, I would say, when you're thinking about, when pretty technically, um, use opportunities like your cover letter and networking to tell your story. Like, don't write the boring customary, basically your cover letter is the regurgitation of your resume. No, that is your chance to tell your story. And so that's where you hone in on things like Ariel said around the mission alignment, the skills alignment. And then when you're in the interview, from that first phone interview, you run headfirst into the fact that it's a change, right? Like, just dismantle the elephant in the room and say, listen, I know that my resume seems unusual, but let me tell you why it's not. And
Yeah.
then you go right into that and you tell your story and you draw them in. And I promise 9 times out of 10, it will make them stand up. And then that confidence. See, this is the adaptive pieces that are really hard to come through on a resume. It's the confidence to even go there boldly in that way that
Hmm.
makes people that like that's what they're looking for. Someone who's confident, someone who knows how to tell their story, to make synergies, and use this opportunity as as you sell yourself to show them how you work.
hmm I love that, and it's almost like the two things that you all said are like the perfect blend of how you can show up. I didn't even plan this. This happened naturally. Okay, so this is working out so well. I who knew? But yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the other thing is, and I talk about this in the diversity training that I do. We define diversity as recognizing that each person is unique and has a unique contribution to bring to a situation. And so, piggybacking off of both the combination of bringing your values to the table and then the practical advice from patients around showing up in your authentic self in your cover letter as an opportunity to really share who you are. I also encourage you to lean into that thing that makes you unique. Lean into how the things that you've done, although they may not fit the so quote unquote traditional mold, will add value to the work that you're seeking to engage in. Because trust me, when I ran an organization in a campaign, there are going to be a million people who come off of this campaign and roll into that campaign. There's only going to be a few people who maybe come from a corporate sector or come from a nonprofit sector or come from a differing sector. And what I'm interested in when I see those kinds of candidates is how they understand they'll bring what they know into this world. And so just know that that can be very compelling and frankly can break the monotony a little bit and may get your resume noticed because you've tapped into your uniqueness. Next question up. What skill sets do organizations look for? That's kind of a broad question, but let's take a crack at it. Patience, why don't you take that one
Yeah.
first?
So I think it is really important to know the organization you're applying for. So you want to do your research because it's so specific, it's industry specific, within industry is niche specific. And you think about the time, the like place and time and moment in time that the organization is in. Is it in a moment of change and transition? Is it in a moment of stabilizing? Like what is going on? So if you can get your hands on like a strategic plan that the organization has up on the website, or just anything that could tell you the latest articles, the latest media that's um, or a conversation with someone who knows someone at the organization to just really understand the moment of time the organization in, that will help you determine that. So, for example, in times of change, folks are looking for folks who are adaptable and can are comfortable with ambiguity in times of uncertainty, right? Like those things are really important. So if you know or if that an organization is in a time of change and transition or starting a new strategic plan, lean into that, right? Like that's what folks want. Someone who's not afraid of change and can like recognize that. And then you tie your skill sets into why, and on your cover letter, helping folks understand why, what one, that you recognize that they're in a time of transition, which signals that you've done your research, which is always impressive. And then you can speak right to things that might be keeping that organization up at night. And, the big secret, there's no secret here, but when organizations are in certain time in spaces in their life cycle, there are some general things you can extrapolate, like what I said, the need for adaptability, the need for flexibility, and providing steady in times of storm and change. And so my broad sort of answer to that, and I'll pause here, is just like understanding the context and the time that the organization is in and tailoring to that, because it's so important. I think always though organizations want folks who are consistent. That never changes.
For
What would
sure.
you
I
say?
Yeah, I think that's it. You have to know the organization that you are applying to, and organizations can tell. They can tell that you've done your research and you understand where they're at. But I think, in terms of looking at skill sets, organizations often understand that there are teachable skill sets and there are skill sets that are not teachable, that an applicant should come with when they're being hired. And so, the teachable things are, helping, the new employee to understand the community that they're working in, or to to better understand the language that the organization uses. Those kind of things that are really easy and will happen in onboarding. But the non-teachable, is demonstrating how strategic you are, how organized you are, your creativity. And I think in terms of some hard skills, what organizations now are really looking for is showing some data management. Our nonprofits are really trying to tie back to data all the time, because I'm sure, as patients can talk to, that's where the funding is. That's, we want to see that. And so if a candidate can show that, that they understand how to track data, or how to organize data, and maybe that's from a research class you did, or maybe that's, from your own life, how you track your own spending, as an example. That's all things that can be transmittable to a hard skill like data management. That's kind of something that I think is key for organizations, and anyone can display that.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, the chat is on fire, so you guys are doing such a great job. The next question comes from James, and James says, that in the early part of his career, he was in mass communications and educating professional communicators. He came to campaign work 3 years ago and has been doing field work. And but has found that even though he has a wealth of experience in media, he's been typecast as a field guy. How does he change that perception? And, I think a lot of people sometimes find themselves typecast in roles because of their last job. What's a good way to really share with potential employers the full range of your skill set and abilities? Who wants to go first? Patience, go ahead.
I love this question. I am now running broadly the foundation, and I stepped into this role about 7 months ago. But I was the senior vice president of external affairs, and I had been a comms person my entire career. And so to go from that to sort of general management, there are a couple of reflections that I have about just broad sort of typecasting, and how to break that. One, it was really important wherever I go to really understand the business, really understand the organization that I was in. And so I was in everybody's business. Like one of the things I did in my comms role without asking is sort of adding a lot of value in other departments and divisions. And so I created a lot of, synergies there, allies there, and I ended up partnering with other folks in my organization and making their work better, which then I let my I'm very good at telling my own story internally. And so my open communication with my manager about what I was doing, what I was seeing, patterns I was noticing, because she had to have a macro view. So I was helping her manage her macro view, which added a lot of value and showed to her that I get it, right? That I get it. So then I became a trusted advisor. And then she started stretching me and putting me in places almost like a de facto chief of staff, because I just knew a lot and had a lot of relationships. And my reputation was good. And so when the time came for a broader role, I didn't even have to do much selling of that. It just became an extension of what folks knew of me. And so I shared that my story to just like extrapolate the big sort of rocks that I'm sharing. I encourage my mentees and my team to take on stretch projects, take on things that are outside of your wheelhouse, so that you can learn, but things that you know you can add value to, so that there is a duality to the relationship in that other domain. Because as soon as you do that, those projects become yours. That's your work, and that's your narrative, and that's your story, and then you get to tell that whenever you're ready for that next, to explore the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely love that, Ariel.
I could not agree more, and I think that speaks to the world that we're in terms of our organizations. That you can come in one role, and there is so much internal shifting. Quite frequently, actually, because nonprofits, that's the world, that's the world of foundations, that's the world, that's the political world. There's a lot of movement, and so you could come in your role as a field organizer, or something that you do, and then you can push that into the direction that you want. I think that that's something that we see internally in our organization and in my peer organizations all the time. I think also using your experience, and I think both Patience and Holly, you talked about it, of taking it head on and saying, this is my experience, but this is how I want to use that experience for this role. So
Yeah,
really using it as that stepping stone,
yeah.
and hiring managers will really appreciate that.
Oh, for sure. And I also just want to highlight, especially from the people who are interested in like campaign roles. Campaigns are one thing, and that is usually short staffed. And so use those opportunities to take advantage of the needs that may exist within the organization, not in a way that is overbearing or pushy, but as Patience says, in a way that where you are constructively adding value. So if you're not the campaign manager, go to the campaign manager and say, for instance, I see we could use some help on pushing out things on social media. I'm happy to try to take on or support that role. And that's even true for nonprofit institutions and foundations. We wish we had millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to hire for all of the things that we need done. But people really do encourage and support that initiative, especially when it's done in a constructive way. This chat is on fire. Thank you guys so much for making this my job so easy. I don't have to ask any of my questions because you guys got them all. So one of the next questions is, um, how do we um, how do we convey uh how do we convey our skill sets in a resume? What's the best way? What is it useful to have an executive summary, or should we provide a complete resume? I think some of this is also hitting at, where do we fall on the one pager versus a more complete CV, and when do you use which one?
Ariel, why don't you go and kick this in?
Sure, yeah. I think I
I
think
have many thoughts, by the way.
right, as any person who looks at a lot of resumes does. But I think resumes really are reflective of a person's personality, and they are all different. They are, they're unique, and that's okay. So, I don't think there's one set way to write a resume. Certainly, you want to try and be concise. You want to try and get across, highlight, some of the great skills you have, some of the experience you have. But whether you do an executive summary, in my mind, and when I'm looking through resumes, I think that just depends on who you are, and truly what feels right to you. So I don't Patience, I'm sure you want to jump into.
So I think this is another place that's contextual to industry. So, like in academia, for example, it is customary to have a long, long CV that talks about all your publications and all your awards and all those things, etc.
Right, right.
Um, in the philanthropic industry, not so much. And I, just to be very candid, like I think it's really important what we're looking for. Usually there's like a quick skim and then a deep skim. And so your resume usually gets a couple of passes, and I'll share in from my perspective. And again, this is one perspective. And do your research and think about industry. I think that there is, I mean, you can call it an executive summary, but I think there is the thing that has worked for me personally and that makes my eyes perk up is that section at the top that's supposed to tell me, it's not an objective, but that summarizes, you know, what your unique value add is. And that piece is what keeps me reading through all of your, then I look at your professional experience down below as evidence of that. Like I'm looking for, that. And so that piece is a really important branding moment. You call it the above the fold. Like if you're scrolling a website, everything before you can scroll, that is what keeps people scrolling. And so you want to take advantage of that real estate up there to say, ask yourself the question, what do I do better than no one else? Brag, be braggadocious, like just do it. And so I that makes me perk up. And then in the experience piece, it is, I recommend that you do a brief summary of what your role is, but then spend those bullet points talking about your successes. Like, what have you done in this role to make impact? And that piece, it shouldn't read as a role description, a JD. It should read as your impact story, your impact narrative, especially in like sort of the nonprofit philanthropic sector. And there are like crossovers between like politics and all these other industries. But I will just share from my perspective. It's about you, and to bring in what Ariel said before, like this is the thing that like presents you, so make it your own. Make it about you. I should be able to walk away and tell somebody else why I'm excited to talk to you later. So that's my advice. Again, one perspective.
Yeah, I love that. And I would also alert people to the fact that, we're living in an electronic age. So, one thing I would caution you about is make sure your LinkedIn is up to date. Many times now, people won't even really look at your resume. They'll click on your LinkedIn first. And if they're not seeing what they want on your LinkedIn, they won't even read the paper. Even though people do have you put in papers and cover letters. That LinkedIn is really your calling card. So, all of these tips that they've talked about in terms of your resume, I highly encourage you to make sure that that's included on your LinkedIn. I can tell you that. I help to recommend people to the administration in various positions. And the only thing they really wanted me to send was their link to their LinkedIn profile. And going into the administration, that was their first cut. And they were like, if the LinkedIn checks out, then we'll ask for more information as needed. And I know more and more employers are starting to go to that. So, just an insider tip, I can tell you, I had the unfortunate experience of having to tell one young person that because they didn't have a LinkedIn account, that I couldn't even submit their information because the administration was only looking at people who had LinkedIn. And so just think about that. Let's move to the next question because boy, do we have a lot. And you guys, by the way, you guys are doing fabulous. Those of you all listening, I know you have your notepads out. This session is being recorded and will be available for replay later, so you can tell your friends about it because these ladies are dropping gems. Okay, so the next question. Um, how long, she wanted to ask, how long have you stayed at a particular job or employer, and how so called job hobbyers may be perceived in progressive spaces. So, how important is it for a person to be on their job for a length of time, and how are we feeling now about length of time on the job and how employers view that?
As someone who probably would be considered a job hopper, I don't. I care about that less, the actual number of years. I look more at, does your sequence of organizations and sequence of roles tell me a story about your ambition and who you are, does it make sense? Does it make
Mhm.
sense? There's a lot you can extrapolate if you look at the full picture. And so I've been at my organization, it'll be 4 years in April, and it is the longest I've ever stayed a place. And I get a 2 year itch. I'm always looking for my next thing, but I am extremely ambitious, and so it's a thing. So if you were to look at my resume, it would make sense, like, because it's always a next, more, macro thing. And then part of I had a career shift from anti-hunger to anti-poverty work to education, and that was a result of a mayoral appointment. And so that was about 2 years, because and so there
Yeah.
was a switch there. And so it makes, does it make sense? And so I think folks are more open to it, but the things that I look for are, is it I do perk up when I see less than a year. That is one thing that I do perk up. I perk up at that, and but I always just respect people's hustle, and I think it's important right now that you have that. And ambition is something that is important to me, and so yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that the industry is changing on this. I think that
Mm.
we as employers or hiring managers or folks looking through resumes understand that people do move around, just like patient said, or what I've done. It's we as a society want to keep the hustle. We want to keep going and get those experiences. And so I think just sharing why you've moved around, it doesn't have that story. And if you have, I totally agree with what Patient said with the year, because that is certainly a flag. If you've been at a place less than a year, that's a flag for me for sure, and most of my hiring managers. But if you get in the door and you have that, then I just take it head on and just talk about why the experience, why it was less than a year. If it didn't work out, that's okay. Just share a little bit about why it maybe didn't work out, in your benefit, right? And you can share that the place that you were working, uh, was not doing you any favors. You really needed to move on with your career. However you want to share that story, but it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to move on then and talk about the other experiences you had.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you're the narrative of your own story. So take advantage of the fact that you're writing your resume, you're writing your cover letter, you're designing your LinkedIn page, to tell the narrative that really describes what you're doing. And I would say this in the political world, again, I'll be here representing like political campaigns as well as the committees. We recognize that our world works in a cycle, particularly federal campaigns. And if you're someone who is working local campaigns, those cycles may be even shorter. You may be on a campaign 6 months, you may be on a campaign for 2 years, or somewhere in between. And so to the point is that you just it needs to have some purpose, it needs to have some depth, there needs to be some context behind the longevity in which you stay on a job. Well, I'm gonna keep it moving because the questions are rolling in. This is so exciting to have this. It's so wonderful, and thank you all for being so engaged. So James asked, he worked as a reporter, and he used to have standard questions that he was prepared to ask, but he said the best interviews came when he could just sit down and talk with people. So now he's looking for a comms job, and he has a background in publications. And he asked if it's a good idea or a bad idea to design his resume like a newsletter. Would that work or not work? How would you all respond to that? And I know both of you have hiring authority, so this is what's good, is that you're really hearing from people who make these calls.
I would be open to that if you were applying for like a graphic design or creative director role. Outside of that, I don't know that I would love it so much per- personally. I still would read every word, okay, and try to get I think it would mentally be work to do that. And part of it is partially me just frankly needing to disrupt my own bias, just to be candid. And so I'm actively working to do that. And so I would read it, but it would take me a bit longer. And then if we were to get to an interview, I would ask you about your choice, and I out of just sheer spirit of curiosity. Um, I really appreciate this question. See, I'm disrupting my own bias right now. So,
I love it. We all learn from each other.
Totally. I think when you have a resume that's memorable, I mean that it is. It's just that it really sticks in your head. I think you got to have, what's on your resume has to back it up. So if you are doing something creative, it can't take away from what's on your resume to share your experience. I also think there's other ways to get that creativity across. I think that you can look at the organization and in an interview, you can talk about, you can go on to their website, and if that's your angle, you want to talk about comms or the digital of an organization, you can present an idea that you have and help share, if you were in this role, this is what you would do, and do that even before they ask you. I think that's a really creative way to get across the same thing that you were going for with that type of resume. So it's knowing the organization and thinking about creative ways to get your personality across and your own creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that this is like two different perspectives, and I think it goes back to, really do some research and learn the industry and learn sort of where the expectation and where the standard is. It's definitely a risk to stick out, but make it make sense in relationship to the jobs that you're applying for. And not just creativity for creativity's sake. And I will say, the one of the lines for me is I certainly admire the creativity, but I'm not going to substitute creativity for experience. The fact that you've done something really creative is not going to distract me away from the content, and especially when I'm thinking about who I want to be a part of my team. So that's really ultimately the most important. Doug, thank you for the shout out with LinkedIn. LinkedIn is also how you make yourself searchable to recruiters and hiring managers. Yes. And especially a lot of people use LinkedIn and to search and to find people. It is a great resource for that. And I would just put a shout out also for Gain Power. Gain Power is another place where people regularly use, especially people in the progressive space, use Gain Power as a place to find you. So putting your resume or your profile and making sure it's updated in all of those places can be really valuable. Um, I must have missed Doug's question about trends you're seeing in hiring in the progressive movement. What kinds of roles are we seeing that there'll be a lot of and a need for in 2022? Well, I'm going to kick this one off myself if you all don't mind, and saying, listen, uh, the world we are now in a space and there's a lot of opportunity for candidates of color, more so than ever. Every single client I have is looking for ways to diversify their employment and their employees and their staff in all kinds of ways, not just around sort of the typical demographic stuff, which is certainly happening around race and gender, LGBTQ, all of those things, but also geography and experience and perspective. And so this is a real opportunity for us to enter the marketplace in our authentic self, in all of the identities that we represent, and to really be identity forward. And I can tell you, 10 years ago, I might not have given this advice. But in this environment, especially in the progressive movement, we are really focused on being more intentional about being representative. And so, in that representative space, people are really trying to figure out the who you are. So, leading on how your identity shapes all of your identities, shape your perspectives can be really important. That's definitely one trend that I'm seeing. Um, what about you, Eric? What are some of the trends you're seeing?
Well, I think COVID-19 has really shifted our world in so many ways in the job market too. And lots of organizations have gone through restructuring. Some have done layoffs and furloughs and are trying to bring people back and build up that workforce. And so really it is such a wonderful market for job seekers. You can go out and really look to find that great job. In terms of trends, in my world, it's always fundraisers. It's always people willing to go out there and sell the organization and build up the support for the organization. And so I think that's what I see with my peer organizations and what I see certainly in our organization. But really, I mean, I think that organizations for comms work is really big because people are really trying to keep up with the digital space and be a voice in that space. And so that wasn't something that was needed as much. It's building up, but now it's really taking on. And so those are two spaces that I think I see lots of trends in that direction. But Patience, I'd love to know what
I,
you think as
I
well.
couldn't agree with you more. You both. There are a couple of things on my mind that sort of through lines across role types that I want to touch on. A confident competence on DEI matters. Being able to, no matter whether it's a human resources job, an administrative, finance, comms, whatever role you play. Oh, and I have to run and grab my charger in a minute. I'm so sorry. In the middle of the
No, you're
live
fine.
stream. Um, that piece is really important. You spoke about Holly, diversity and inclusion, and I want to just name too that for white people, allyship, confident competence in allyship is a thing. Authentically being able to make meaning of and reflect on and be about true equity and inclusion work and how that impacts you, not what you see happening to others, but you is where it's at. And so do your work and get there and let that become your story and tell that and infuse that and live that. That piece is really important. So that allyship piece, because DEI is not just for the people of color, as we all know. So that
Right.
piece is really important. Then the other piece I would say, especially given the time we're living in, I'm so glad, Ariel, you brought up the pandemic we're living through. It is causing every organization to drastically think about how the pandemic is changing them. And so strategy, being able to bring, having strategic competence is so important because every organization and every department is going to be having to ask the question over this coming year, how has it shifted how we work? So that piece
Absolutely.
is important. You guys ask the questions.
Take some time. Go get your
I'll be
charger.
able to
We'll
get
be
my
right
charger.
here.
Okay.
I want to add, in terms of the kinds of roles, I'm going to tell you, this is also a period of expansion for progressives. And I just want to acknowledge that too. One of the reasons that there's been so much opportunity for progressive work is because we're expanding. More organizations are coming online. We're also seeing an explosion in the number of candidates that we have. All of those candidates are going to need support. I want to shout out to James again for acknowledging that yes, if you're working a campaign job, many times they don't last more than a year. So we get that and we understand that. But thinking about how you're getting into larger campaigns that may have longer lead times. Um, but that is also like exploding. So many of our races, even in the primaries now, are becoming competitive because we got a slew of people running for everything and more people getting engaged and involved. And so I think you'll definitely see that trend continue in 2022. I happen to be here in the state of Maryland. And we have, I think we have one candidate drop out, but we've literally got 13 people running for governor. All of them are running campaigns. That's jobs, jobs, jobs across the board. I think 11 of those are Democrats. So, again, we're seeing I mean, just the level of people who are putting themselves out there is creating a lot of opportunity. Um, I also, yes, thank you, Doug. Appreciate. Listen, you guys, please read the chat because even we have our panelists from the chat that are also dropping gems about how you can learn stuff when things don't work out, and that can also be part of your narrative. Listen, we understand in politics. Some of these jobs just don't go well. Sometimes the candidates lose, and then what? And so there are things that happen, and that's certainly a part of it. um Sometimes you do. Thank you again, Doug, helping us out in the chat. Have managers who are toxic, and so that may be a thing. And I think that's also something that's coming out in pandemic culture. People are really seeking how they can be whole in their jobs and not be in situations that are toxic for them or not in keeping with their passion. And I think that's an opportunity even for the industry to kind of dig in more. I know remote work is another trend that we're starting to see because not all, but some industries are finding that they can actually be more efficient doing remote work. But I caution you on the remote work piece and especially digging in that too deep because in the progressive work and in the work that really touches and concerns the community, some of that work you just got to do in person, and there is a value to showing up and being present and having a presence in certain places. I do work, for instance, with the Human Rights Campaign, and we were having this conversation, and I said to them, y'all got to go back to work because there's something powerful about having um, the queer community represented and present in a building that they own in real estate in DC and seeing that vibrancy. And so, again, you have to kind of play it that way. Okay, Jonathan has a question for us. How would you approach a military resume that may or may not contain the types of skills that you're used to encountering? So we have a lot of people who have been part of our armed forces and service, military services. And I think a lot of people would see this as a positive, but what approach should people take? I'm going to go to you first, Aria, because you work in the environment of peace. How does the military resume resonate with you?
Oh, I think I mean, we love it. I mean, I think that when you have a military background, you come with so many skills. You come with just a slew of experience, and it's really just how you share that, how you can translate that to the work that we do. So, whether it's organizing, if you've been a manager, if you've overseen people in your military career, that's a wonderful attribute that you have going in off the bat, that you've been able to manage a budget. If you oversee, if you oversee equipment, you are tasked with, U.S. government's, possibly thousands of dollars of equipment, and you're able to manage that. And so, it's really, and so going into a nonprofit, you're able to, you're really able to manage an event. You're able to manage an office. Really, there's so many different skills that can cut across in this. And I think that you have such an easy thing to sell it, because you have so many skills.
I,
I'm excited
I
on that
agree.
one, but I hope that was coming across.
Yeah, it was
No,
good.
I love your zeal because yes, that is, I agree. I think, when you're going one industry to another, it's just about translation. And I think that that piece is important. And so, the way that on a military resume, how management might be talked about might be a very particular way. Just got to translate that into the industry in a way that the industry that you're going into or seeking out can understand. My Puerto Rican colleagues always say, "Tell me in rice and beans and make it plain." That piece is just important, and it's a most military resumes are a treasure trove of experience that you get like massive, fast, concentrated. And so go there. I think, and if you need help, seek help. Find someone who is a skilled resume writer or brand expert or, to help you do that translation, or find someone in the industry that you are seeking out to take a look and see how it's resonating. Yep. Ariel, you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I think one thing too, well, there's two things actually, but there's so much specific lingo on a military resume. And I think it's important to kind of, when you're reformatting your resume, to try and make it a little more plainer, because there are a lot of people that don't quite understand that. So that's one thing to keep in mind, to kind of translate your resume, including the specific language. But also, you're doing some of the same skills, but in a tougher environment. And so, that's a really saleable asset. And that's something that you should put forward as well.
Grace under pressure. Important.
Great under pressure. Well, listen, I can't believe we've already been talking. 50 minutes has gone by so fast. I'm going to do two more questions, ideas from the chat, and then I have a closeout question for you all. So, our next to last question from the chat is, how do you think progressive space will be impacted by remote work? And I know we've kind of hinted at this a little bit. But I think a lot of people are trying to figure out the impact and the crossover between coming out of this remote space, and are we staying in? Are we going out? Is it something in between? So, what are some of the ways you've seen the space impacted by remote work?
I think it's all about flexibility, and both flexibility on the organization side and flexibility on candidate side and employee side. We're all in this trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And everyone in this space, or in my space at least, went completely remote and is now trying to figure out, okay, how much do we need to be in person? What is essential? And there are going to be some jobs that you will need to be in person, and you just have to know going in, are you comfortable with this? Is this a lifestyle you want? Or on the other side, that something's going to be remote, and jobs have gone completely remote. And are you comfortable with that? Do you need an office? You have to know what you need and what makes you happy working in an organization. So if you're okay working all day on a computer by yourself, or in a house that may have lots of distractions, for not just the COVID future, but the foreseeable long-term future, that's you should share that. But if you're not okay with that, then you really need to look for jobs that do have that in-person environment. And it's going to be both, again, on you as a candidate to search for what works for you, and share your flexibility too, if you have that flexibility.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's such a duality, and it is not black or white. It is not,
Lots of gray.
yeah, it's a lot of gray. And I think remote work has definitely proven that we must be nimble and that organizations must be nimble, and sustainably and perpetually figuring out what nimble means for them. And um, making decisions around whether to, and I'm living this right now, whether, the organization's mission calls for, like, that should be what dictates what happens. And so
Yeah.
If an organization's mission can sustain remote work and still be credible in the space, great. For my organization, for example, even though we're a foundation and have lots of privilege and can make choice, it's really important to us, given the mission that work that we do. Students most impacted by inequity, educators who never had the choice to really like go remote by choice, and have the same flexibilities. It's really important as folks who believe in proximity. That is our credibility, and we are making choices that um, we sacrifice some of our wants and privileges and needs for what we believe is is right and credible to the communities that we want to be in partnership and community with. And so we are right now making decisions around what does remote work look like. It is here to stay in some way, but we are a more than not in person environment. And that's been a shift. And we made the shift to come back 6 months ago. And so, because we knew the muscles had to reatrophy and that we had a lot to learn, and there was no good time to pull that trigger. And so, we're trying to figure it out, and we are learning and growing and listening every day.
And one thing that's a common thing, you guys gave different perspectives, is that what you're hearing and what they're talking about is that employers are really leaning more into the care of their staff. Now, I think one thing that we learned more than anything going through this pandemic, going through all of the different types of pandemic that we went through, not just COVID, but the racial unrest, the increase in hate crimes, to James Henry's point, just the threat to our overall democracy as we know it, really in so many different ways. One thing that I see organizations, institutions, and employers in general doubling down on is the care for their staff and really thinking through about how this work impacts them and creating spaces and grace for them to have more, to be more intentional about self care, to be more intentional about how the work is impacting them, so that we can come up. Because ultimately, on the one hand, we're doubling down on our efforts because it feels even more urgent. Peace feels more urgent. Diplomacy feels more urgent. Care for others, all of the social ills from education to hunger to healthcare feels more urgent. So we want to be better, and we're recognizing that the way that we're better is by investing in our people. Okay, I'm going to combine these last two questions in the lightning round for you two, and then we're going to close it out. One question is dealing with references, and how do you deal with references and the question of references if you've been self employed? And another question is, are institutions using the keyword count in resumes, and do we do a lot of resume scanning? Are there sort of mechanical or electronic ways in terms of creating the way keywords are used in resume implementation? So if you guys could address one or both of those, then we'll go to our last wrap up question and close it out.
Cool. I'll take references because I have no idea how to answer this other one. I'll leave that to the experts up top, over up there. Um, so self-employed. If you've been self-employed, references could be clients. It could also be vendor partners, folks who
Mhm.
know how collaborative you are, how strategic you are, those sorts of things. Those are the two nuggets I'll sprinkle for you.
That's awesome. You want to tackle keywords? You got any insights
Yeah.
on keywords or references? Either one.
No, I'll jump in on the keywords. And James, I love this question because it really is important. There's a lot of technology now that's being used in um, for applicant tracking, is what it's called. And so this technology does scan keywords. It does pick up, both in your resume or in your cover letter if you are identifying things that are matched in the cover letter. And so that's something that you should be thoughtful about. Now, not every organization has it, and you certainly don't want to put in keywords where it doesn't make sense, but I think it goes back to, if you're really when you're applying, in your cover letter, and of course in your resume, if you're really speaking to the organization and telling your story to the organization and how you can be an asset for that organization. You know, we don't want just, you know, the same cover letter reused and recycled. That's something that any person on the other side can tell. So, you know, if you are tailoring your cover letter, now you don't have to go crazy, you don't have to spend hours, that's not what I'm saying. But if you are tailoring your cover letter and telling your story and how you can help the organization, that will pick up those keywords. If you've done your research, if you've gone online and looked at the website and understand their mission, the values, back to the values at the very beginning, that will come up and those keywords will match.
Ariel and Patience, you all have been amazing. Thank you for joining us for this late evening session. We're going to give you an opportunity to return back to your fun and family and social, as well as the attendees. But I'd love for you just to leave our audience members with some nuggets and, from your experience, lived and learned, from your position as being hiring managers, what are some key tips that you would give to folks who are in that job seeking space right now, and how they can achieve their professional goals and dreams? And whoever wants to go first. Okay, I'll say Ariel. You're an A.
Sure.
A for Ariel.
You know, the thing that comes to mind for me is, you know, be bold, be determined. Really, it's tough going out there and sending resumes after resumes to organizations and having interviews, and it's easy to get down and feel down, but it's you every interview, every time you go out and put yourself out there, you're building yourself up and you're getting more experience and you're learning from those conversations that you've had. You're learning what goes well, what doesn't. So you know, just keep at it. And I think that, you know, in the progressive world, we all work on such big issues that are so meaningful, that are so that sometimes maybe seem like they're not, that, you know, they're intractable. I mean, that's the world I'm in, Palestine and Israel. Like, that has been going on for a really long time. And so when you're going into these organizations, you know, you really want to put yourself in a position where you can look at the small wins and keep people engaged, stay energized, you know, help your colleagues stay energized. And that's something, when you show that in an interview, in your resume, in your cover letter, that's something that you can do. It just will be so meaningful, because, you know, the people that you're applying to work with, sometimes they can get down about the issues that they're working on, but if you come in as that bright light, you know, that's golden. It's so golden.
Yeah, I encourage you to take some time out and do a little bit of journaling about the legacy you want to leave, and figure out how to tell your story around how your skills and your experiences fit with that. And then you might find that you might even shift how you think about your job search and what you go after, because that's when you really find a zeal and a passion, and that exudes. Um, and when you get to that point, I also encourage you to think about your job search as being really precise. Use a scalpel, not a hammer, because people can tell. Like, as someone who hires a lot, I can tell when someone has put precise work and wants to work with me at the organization, with the organization for the mission. I can tell that right away. And I can tell when they've been precise and used that scalpel versus a blunt tool that has been sent out, you know, on some job search website. And those are the ones that give me a lot of joy. And so I would just like leave that and tap into just authenticity and have some fun. I know it's scary. I know we have to make our living. I know, those pressures get hard, but I have seen time and time again, and I have experienced that the times I've gotten the most precise with my job search and who I am, um, I get the job more often than not. Like I've had more success there that way. So that's what I'll leave you with. And thanks so much for having me, Holly.
Oh, this has been amazing. I just want to add two quick points in the advice column, and that is live on your values. Being a part of the progressive space is an opportunity to live your values out loud and make sure that they show up in all the materials that you present to a potential employer. And that's good advice, even if you already have a position. Just lean into your values. This creates an opportunity not just for us to do the things that we love, the task and the skills that we love, but to work for causes that we believe in. It's really our opportunity to change the world. And I know that sounds crazy. But these ladies work hard every day just to do that, and there are hundreds of other organizations doing the same to change the world in their span of influence and sphere of control. And so just tap into that. And secondly, network, 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 network. Never miss an opportunity to create a relationship. In that regard, I encourage you all stay connected to me. I'm on LinkedIn under my name, Holli Holliday. I'm always willing to help provide advice. I see myself as a connector. Connect with each other. Really take advantage of this platform and the Powering Blue in 2022 conference to connect to each other. I already got connection people coming in. I promise you, I'll accept because I want to have the biggest network in the world so I can help connect others. I believe that power is not a scarcity but abundance, and our power grows when we are connected to each other and helping each other and building each other up. I want to thank all of you for being a part of this fantastic panel, but particularly, Ariel and Patience. I give you a standing ovation, as I know our attendees would as well. You all have been fabulous. And I think I leave you with, the best part about this is that it's also fun. And don't forget or lose the opportunity to have a little fun in your job search and your job. And as we work together to change the world, we are the change we want to see, and we can do it working together and in our spaces. Thank you so much. I believe this will be available on replay. Also, just a quick shout out that I do have. If you enjoyed this panel, I'll be, if you want to spend some one on one time with me, my organization, Sisters Lead, Sisters Vote, will be doing an exhibit booth tomorrow. And I have one more panel tomorrow afternoon on Black women in political leadership. So feel free to check those out tomorrow. Until then, good night and thank you. Good luck on your job hunt and your career success. And thank you for being willing to be a part of changing the world with us. Good night.
Thanks all.